Okay, so everybody, in this lesson, we are going, oh, guess what? Guess what? We've got a guest. Come on in, Doug. So Doug actually just got home from a mission a couple weeks ago, and I know we've talked about him a little bit, but also he just came home from working in summer cells with his brother. So anyways, we'll get back to the lesson. Thanks, Doug. Okay, so in this lesson we're going to focus on the ub. When it is a Latin root, it's going to say ub most of the time. Not always, but most of the time, depending on what Latin root is going to be. Daniel's making me laugh. And then we're going to focus on the dis section and more Latin roots that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to go in and talk about some 3-syllable words. Okay, so now look, the ub, it means against and towards. What does ub mean?
Against and towards.
Yep. Say it again. That is a prefix or suffix, or what is it?
Against.
That is a prefix. So this goes at the beginning of words. That's where you're going to find that, at the beginning of words. And this also will go on lots of different Latin roots that have different letters. And see, like the P's and the C's and the F's, they typically just go on P's, C's, and F's. But the B's will go on lots of different Latin roots that don't just start with its very own letter right there. Does that make sense? Okay, so what does ub mean, boys?
Against, toward.
Yes, what does it mean?
Against and toward.
Against and toward. So look at this.
Obliteration.
Nice, good, obliteration. So ub means against or toward. And this is your Latin root. You know that if you see T-I-O-N, that you are sitting in a Latin root area. And then also if you see the prefix ub, you know you're going to be sitting in a Latin root that's going to have its own meaning. So this whole thing means remove completely. Now it's a form of New Latin. So we have really old Latin, right? We have like the Middle Latin, and then we have a newer form of Latin because our language changes. Mm-hmm. And I remember just reading about the Egyptian language, and I actually briefly studied a little bit about Old Egyptian. I think it's completely fascinating, but I don't have time to study it. But it's just their language just has evolved over time. And that's how our language, everybody's language changes because we speak differently. I speak differently than what my parents spoke. I was just looking at a word with one of my kids, and they said, I've never heard of that word. And I spoke it when I was young. My parents spoke it. But you guys speak differently than what we did. All right, so now everything that is in this section, the ub section, is the OB, the OP, the OC, the OF. It's right here. What does it mean? Against or towards, right, Paul? It means against or towards. Now we have opposers. OP goes, what's your Latin root in there?
OP.
What's the Latin root?
ERS.
Pose. Pose is the Latin root in here. Right here, ER is your suffix, and then you have the OP right here, that is your prefix. So look at this. This is the reason why you have double letters here. You have one for the root and one for the what?
Suffix.
Prefix, good. So now, oppressed. What's your root in here?
Press.
Press. This is your prefix. This is your suffix.
Oppressed.
Oppressed. Now, can you hear me say this? Oppressed. It's not saying oppressed, because closed syllables force your vowels to be short. This is a closed syllable. If you divide it right in the middle, right here, you guys, this is going to say short sound. Do we say opposers?
Opposers.
we don't. You say opposers. This turns to schwa because it's a closed O. So you just need to memorize these. What do we have? OB, OP, OC, OF. O-B-O-P-O-C-O-F. Say that, boys.
O-B-O-P-O-C-O-F.
Nice. That means against or toward. Can mean either one depending on really what you need it to say on your root, because your root's going to mean something else. How about this word? Officiousness. Now, what is your prefix? O-F right here is the Latin prefix.
Oh, okay.
So,
I was gonna guess that at first, but then.
So this right here, the F-I-C, is your Latin root. This is a suffix and this is a suffix. Now you just need to remember, this can be confusing. Well, there's so many compound words that say off, and we've talked about that in another lesson, how we almost want to say off. But so be careful. Sometimes you need to have that as off.
Efficient.
But when you have it as off, you don't break it down the double F's. But this one, you would break down the double F's when you want to divide it into syllables. It breaks right here. And if you remember in the other words, we didn't break it down right there. Officiousness.
Officiousness.
Yeah. So this turns to schwa because it's a closed O.
That's confusing.
And these turn to schwa. So most of the time when you have your Latin prefix like this, boys, it is going to turn to schwa. Almost always. But not always.
Oppressed.
Oppresses with the plural S. Prefix, suffix, Latin root. Latin root, press. So then you do have some unusual words like this word. Say this word, Daniel.
Optional.
Nice, optional. This right here is your prefix, but which one's the accented syllable? You have obelisk right here. This right here is doing the same thing right here. It is a prefix, but it's saying it's short sound because it's a closed syllable. And this is the Latin root. Okay, so this is not the accented syllable, this is the accented syllable here. So it won't always follow that rule, but most of the time you're going to find the accent more here and not in your prefix. All right, boys? When you're figuring out your reading and you're figuring out hard words, that's what's going to happen here. Occurs. Nice. So this one turns to schwa. This is your Latin root. So one C goes to the prefix and one goes to the root. This one, so you need to memorize what O-B, O-P, O-C-O-F. They fall in that section. Okay?
Occur.
Occur. So if we look at that, what's the Latin root? We just talked about that. Cur. See, this is the suffix right here. This is your prefix, so it's doing the same thing. So now we have a double here and a double here, one for the prefix and one for the Latin root. And then what do we have here? Nice, Paul, thank you. Occurring. What happened here?
You just had to double.
Now, most of the time when you have multi-syllable words in the regular English language, you don't double it. You always double on the accent if you have a consonant, vowel, consonant when you're adding on a vowel suffix. This right here is the accented syllable. It's the Latin root, and you can hear it. Occur. So if you hear this one turn to schwa, you know that your Latin root, C-U-R, needs to be doubled. Do you get that? If you hear, so you guys can read this word, no problem. Occur. Occurring. You know, if you can hear that right there, to switch to schwa, you know you need to double this letter because it's a consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant. So if that's the case, this needs to be doubled. All right, so add another meaning to, against, toward. This is another meaning for the the OB, the OP, the OC, the OF, the up, the uck, the uff. These turn to schwa most of the time. All right, so the word occurring Cur means to run, okay? But the whole word, if you're gonna put it together for the entire meaning, it means being detached. So you can say, well, it's falling in the against. For the it's against. It also means, occurring means to exist. It's occurring. So to. And then it also, occurring means thought of. And that's toward. So really, things fit if you look at different definitions. If you want it to be this, occurring to mean to be thought of. If you want it to mean to exist or being detached, it could be different things as you're looking at that certain word. You know how you're looking up at Fix It and it's saying, choose the correct meaning for what fits in the sentence. That's what this is doing, you guys. See how occurring has different definitions. So you need to be really careful on how you're using your word in your sentence. And it could mean, look, being detached, exist, thought of, it just can have different meanings to that. Oceanologics. This is actually a hard word to say. Right here, the j is not saying g because of this right here. But I put this in here because we have an OC right here. Just because it starts with an OC does not mean it is your Latin prefix. The ocean, that's part of this word. Look at this one, octave. Is the OC part of this prefix? No, it's part of a Latin, it's a part of a Greek word. Oct means what?
8.
8. So it's not always the same, but just make sure that you know what it could be. How about this one? Open abilities. So really, your base word right here is open. It is not your OP, your Latin prefix. So just be careful with when you're trying to figure it out, and you'll notice it the more you read, the more you break words apart, you'll catch these things. Now, some of the words that I really want you to feature, we are going to focus on Latin roots. These are all Latin roots that I want you to focus on. Let's say them. Now, even if you don't have the definition down, it's really important that you can identify these as Latin roots because it'll help your spelling. Not only that, it'll help you pronounce the word correctly. And so let's read them again, nice and fast, boys.
Cell, count, duct, gress, no, mort, fuse.
Read them again.
Cell, count, duct, gress, no, mort, fuse.
Again.
Cell, count, duct, and gress, no, mort, fuse.
Okay, so I had the boys say them over and over and over again. I want them this in their mind so they can pick it out, so they can pull it apart and be able to understand the word better. Cell, count, duct, gress, null, mort, fuse. Now we have, what's this word again?
Officiousness.
Officiousness. We had that up here. This, we're just going to talk about multi-syllable words. Okay, so we have the word officiousness. Look at that. Prefix, root, suffix, suffix. Obliviousness. Prefix, root, suffix, suffix. Officious. Prefix, root, suffix. Obstructiveness. Prefix, root, suffix, suffix. Obstruction. Prefix, root, and this kind of goes right here and then it goes right here. So these ones are objectify, prefix, root, and your suffix. A bit tricky. This could be off tracked. And this could be where some people say it's off track, T-R-A-C-K. So, but I wanted off track. So you had your Latin root, But look at this. This is your double F. It's not a prefix right here. See what I mean when I was talking about when you double it, this right here is only double because it goes with one vowel and it ends in an F. And so that says off tracked. All right? But look at this one. Offering. Oh. What happened there? Why isn't this doubled?
Oh, because it doesn't need to be.
It doesn't. Fur is one of those Latin roots that you have to be careful with. Can you hear it saying ah? It's saying its short sound. It's saying ah. It's not saying uffering. Are we saying uffering?
Uffering. No.
Since it's saying offering, this R is not doubled like this R is doubled. See, this one says occurring, but this one says offering. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is still the Latin prefix. This is still the Latin root. But when you're adding this suffix on, you don't double it because this is the accented syllable and this is not the accented syllable here. Okay, that's the reason why. This is a hard word to say. Obfuscation. This is your Latin root. And then add-ons. Obfuscation. So this, if it's hard for you to say, break it apart. This one doesn't turn to schwa. It is offishly. Okay? He acted offishly towards me. So look at this. You do not off. This is not the prefix. This right here is your word off. You have a suffix and a suffix. Okay? So that is not the prefix OF. Okay? Daniel, what do you think?
Oblisky.
Obelisk.
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 Why did I add an O?
So this is actually Latin.
Obelisk.
Okay? Obelisk. How about this one? Is this going to be more like offend? This right here does break right here. See how this one does not break right here, but this one? This one is your Latin prefix. This is your fend, is your Latin root. Offend. So be careful with the off and the of. The OFF could be just be off with suffixes added onto it, right? The Latin roots that we talked about, that we just listed, we're going to go through every one of those Latin roots and talk about them individually. So we're going to start with the Latin root cell. And so cell is word forming. You won't see this word by itself. So it'll be in words and it helps form words. But it means small room. And also meaning to hide. So that's what you're going to see when you see CEL in words. Also, so look at this. Small space equals cell, which equals a small space. I want you guys to remember that. CEL, small space, cell, small space. Like, for instance, cellular, relating to our cells. It's small. So remember that that's what that means. Also, it fits in CEAL section. These are very similar, different spelling, like conceal, which means hide or cover, and others can't see. So you can't see what's going on. It's being concealed. Like you could put a concealer on your face so it covers up any imperfections that you feel is on your face. So like the occultation right here, the CUL is very similar and it means disappearance, hidden. See how you can't see? It's hide, covered. They're very similar. So these are words that fit into that area. clan, seal, how you would spell the word ceiling. You're putting a ceiling on your roof, and it's now hiding what's going on. It's covering us from the weather, so we can have our own privacy. So this is how you would spell that. Then we have cell, which we talked about here, and clan. So those are words that that fit into these Latin words that helps you understand what those mean. Also, we talked about count. So you guys remember that's bringing in count? It was the second one we listed. And count can mean lots of different things. And so it's not just a Latin root. And I want you guys to know that. Just because it's on your Latin root list, sometimes they're not always just Latin roots. They have other meanings. And this is one of them. So it means with, like reckoning together, which equals numbers in order, okay? Also, count can also mean to tally. To count up, you use your tally marks. Naming units means to number things, to holler out with numbers. You're hollering that out. Also, which is kind of fun, count right here. That means include. Count me in. Are you being included? That's what that count means. When you say count me in, you're being included as if you were counting. You're counting as the number. But if you say, it also can mean exclude, as in count me out. So you can use it in those terms also. Also, for here, you have this Latin root. Now, for it to be Latin, this is its meaning if you're using it in as a Latin root, okay? So, it's Latin. It means add up, sum up, to count. Like this word, counterintuitive. Counterintuitive. That you're using as a Latin root. Account. Here's your prefix. Here's the root. Okay? Now, count right here, Paul. See how right here? You could also, it falls into the baseball section, which is the number of bases and strikes, which I think is kind of interesting. Look how many different ways you can use that. So, which can be kind of confusing, don't you guys think? Well, I thought count was a Latin root. Yeah, it's lots of different things. So you just need to know what it does. Now also, duct. It means to lead, but it also is an uncountable. All right? So we're going to talk about duct right here as a verb right now. So if you're going to use duct as a verb, which you can, and it has its own meaning all by itself, not in other words, you can use it in the third person with the plural s if it sits in the singular present. Do you remember that? This is your participle, ducting. Here's another participle, ducted. So when you see those, you're going to know. Now look at this one, duct. This is your plural present. See, it does not have the plural s on there. These we're talking about if you're using this as a verb. This can be used as a verb or a noun, depending on how you use it in a sentence. It doesn't have to just be in a Latin root, as a Latin root. But it's important that you can identify it as a Latin root and that you know how to spell this right here. Okay, so we have duct, which means plural present. And that is if you're using this in a verb. So this is singular present with the s, and this is plural present without the s. Does that make sense? Duct as a verb, then this is singular with the plural s. It has to sit in third person. We have ducting, which is a participle, ducted, which is a participle. And with these, you have to use auxiliary verbs right here to make sure that you're sitting that in the correct tense. But here, you just need to make sure that if your subject is singular, then your verb needs to be singular, but it has the plural s. But it needs to sit in the singular present. That means no auxiliary verbs are attached to it. So this right here is plural, which takes the plural noun, plural subject, which is a noun, but this is acting as a verb. Plural present position when you're talking about your tenses. Okay, so now we have duct and ducts, which means it's a noun, right? And it's a direction, it's a canal, it's an abnormal way to carry sound waves. And so remember, it gives guidance, it gives direction. So if you think about our duct tape, when we put our house together, we put in all of the heating and cooling, and that's called our duct work. And it gives guidance for your air to flow in the direction that you want it to flow in. If you just didn't have your duct work, what's going to happen? It's just going to go everywhere. It's going to stay in the attic, and it's not going to be in the rooms that you want it to be. It's giving guidance. So for an example that we have for duct, as a noun, we're going to say, God gives me the perfect duct that I need in my life. People don't really talk like that, but some people might, if you actually really understand what the word duct means. You mostly hear it in building homes, and unless in other countries, but that's where we mostly hear it. But he gives us the perfect, if you can replace guidance or direction, you've used the word correctly. God gives me the perfect guidance that I need in my life. God gives me the perfect direction that I need in my life. Then you know you used it correctly as the word that you need it to be. Okay, so now remember, duct can be a verb or a noun. But look at this, I have my ducks. See how that's spelled D-U-C-K-S? In a row. It's not the same. It's spelt differently. Okay? All right, so now let's move to our Latin root gress. How do we spell gress?
G-R-E-S-S.
G-R-E-S-S. You need to learn how to spell this. This is in lots and lots and lots of words. All right, I think this word is fantastic. It helps us understand so many words. What does gress mean? It means to move. Okay? It means to progress, to have gratitude. It's your grade. See how you think about, okay, you're in first grade, second grade, third grade, you're progressing up. See, you're progressing. You're having gratitude. You're moving along. That's what gress means. Okay, so it also means step. You're stepping forward. For instance, for the word transgress, you're moving across somewhere from one area into another area. So when they say they transgress, they're moving from being in, the only way they could step is to transgress. They could progress and go forward. All right? So now when you see grad, they have the same meaning. So that means to advance. Gress, grad, to advance, they're exactly the same. So when you see grad, like graduation, graduate, see, you're progressing, you're moving forward. Okay? How about the word biodegradable? So it's moving forward, it's decomposing, all right? But look at this gress, G-R-E-S. It's different. It's different than the G-R-E-S-S. So you need to make sure that you're understanding that right there. Okay, so now, the Latin root null. It means none. So what does null mean?
None.
None. So if you say like an annulment, you do not have a marriage anymore. It's done, it's over, it's none, it's not there anymore. Null means none. So for instance, null, so this is the Latin root off of this. So we're going to use null we're going to use them as different parts of speech. Okay, so this word null can be an adjective, a verb, a noun, depending on how you're going to use it in your sentence. So the null curtains. So when I use it as a null curtains, you guys, what do you think? If we say null curtains, what does that mean to you? It means maybe they're sheer, you could see through them, they're not really, or they can mean that it's really poor quality. They're not really, those are bad curtains, okay? How about his voice was nulled as a verb?
It probably means it was quiet.
Yeah, very quiet voice. You couldn't hear really what he was saying. How about the nulling of his voice?
Basically the same thing.
Yeah, this is a noun. This is your gerund sitting in a noun position. That, see how with your gerund, you have to have your prepositional phrase to really understand this part. So, but anyways, this is your noun. See how you can use it as your verb, how you can use it as an adjective. Anyways, null means what? None. Okay, so now look at the Latin root mort. How do you spell mort? M-O-R-T. And it's exactly how you would expect to say it. But these need to be memorized. These are in lots and lots of words, but it equals death when you want to put it in the Latin root area. But it could also mean game hunting, and it's also has different meanings for different languages. So for like my language, this is really what it means, but it could be different if you live in a different part of the world. So now let's look at mort as a noun, okay? And we're going to see if we're going to use mort, and this can be used all by itself in some areas. You'll mostly see it in as Latin roots, but you can see it in those areas. Okay, so now mort, do you know how it's so much easier to understand your plural s on a noun than it is to understand plural s's on your verbs, right? So these are nouns, so this means it's singular because it's a noun. This one's singular. This one as a noun is plural. It's different when you're doing it when you're adding it onto a verb. Mortary, this is an adjective. How about amortized? You have it as a participle. Amortized as a participle. What's different about these two?
One of them has an S, the other has a Z.
So which one is British English and which one's American? American is the I-Z-E. Yep. So if you see I-Z-E, you know it's American English. I-S-E as the suffix is going to be British English. So let's talk about unamortized. Un means not. So we have mort right here that means death, right? But this word right here means not death, right here. Not putting a large sum of money into smaller payments. So you're just going to pay it off. If you're not going to have an amortized loan, it's going to be unamortized. They're going to give you the bill and you're just going to pay for the whole thing. Does that make sense? So when we have our loans, we either amortize them or we have them unamortized. So amortization, the process of taking a large sum into smaller payments. See how this changed the whole meaning. Now this means you are going to put them into smaller payments. And that could mean death if you can't pay your payment, right? And that's the reason why they put it in there, because having a mortgage is very taxing and can stress you out if you can't make that payment. Okay, so now immortalization. We have im. So the double M is, we have one for the root and one for the prefix. And mort means death right here, right? So if this means not, What does it mean?
Not dead.
Not dead. So if we say to make immortal, that means not dead. The immortalization of the twins, we just did that with its subject right here. And this is singular. Why do you know that that's singular? Do you think maybe it could be plural? The immortalization of the twins. See how this is singular? You have this right here is not part of your subject. It's acting as an adjective describing immortalization. So see how this part is singular. So what kind of verb do you have to use?
Singular verb.
You have to use a singular verb. Do you see that, Paul? You don't use a plural verb because the twins is plural. You use a singular verb because you go off of your actual subject, not what's on your prepositional phrase. There are a few exceptions to that, but that's the main rule that you need to focus on. You guys, let's look at fuse. The Latin root means to join, but fuse can also be its very own word, which means safety device. Okay, let's look at a sentence. The fuse was lit before the fireworks were ready. See how this is a noun. It's its very own word. So see right here, if you're using this as a noun, we're using this as a noun. So the 10-foot long fuse, see the noun right here, smells like sulfur. See how we did right here? This is singular, so it takes a singular verb. What tense is this sitting in?
Simple.
It's simple present, right? So this is sitting in the simple present. This right here, fuse, is third person.
Singular.
And so this is singular. Singular takes the singular verb. Okay, so now here are some words that we have. Can you see that really good?
Yes.
So here are some words right here that fit in for the Latin root right here. Effusive, reinfuse, diffusers, circumfused, confusedness. See how those, which one's your root? Show me.
Fuse.
In this word. Fuse, here's your root. Here's your prefix. What about this one?
Fuse.
Fuse is your root. Where's your prefix?
Re.
Re and?
In.
You have two different prefixes on that one. How about this one?
Fuse.
Fuse right here. What's your prefix?
D. Diff.
Diff. See, this is a double F because you use one for the prefix and one for root. Okay? So,
Fuse. Fuse.
fused right there. And fuse right here. Okay, so blend also means fusion, it's root words. So you're gonna have that in fuse. You're blending things together, okay? And you're gonna make a fusion. So now let's go into our prefixes. The dis section, you're gonna have DIS, DI, and DIF. Sam, I want you to know
DIF.
there's only 3 of these. DIS, DI, and DIF. Paul, say them.
DIS, DI, DIF.
Now, this can be confusing in some other ones. There's only 3 here. There's some that have a lot more. It means not. Okay, what do these mean?
No.
It means not. Prefixes tend to have different meanings. So it can also mean away, apart. So look at these words. Digest. See how die and, or some people might say digest, but this is your root. This is your prefix. Direct, this is your prefix, your root. Digress or digress. Some people say it different ways. Either way, this is your prefix, this is your root. Dilution, this is your prefix and your root. Divorce, which I think is really interesting when you think about divorce. With this prefix right here, you're apart, you're away from each other, and that is the prefix in this Latin word. Also, in 1910, to 1915 is when this started to change a little bit, which I think is super interesting, you guys. Think about this. 1910 to 1915. Is that like not very long ago? That was 100 years ago. I feel like that was somewhere in my lifetime because I was born. But look how it changed just 100 years ago. And you think about how thousands of years our language changes. Anyways, do you guys think that's interesting? All right, that's it for this lesson, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.